Good morning, colleagues. Good morning. Good morning. Matilda, we can start now.
Morning, Maritsipi.
Morning. We can start now.
Morning, all colleagues. It's very heartwarming to see that we have 82 participants who have joined, and we are really looking forward to our webinar on information literacy in practice. That will be our guest speaker will be Andiswa Mfengu. I would like now to ask Maria just to do the opening and welcoming remarks for us, please. Maria. Is Maria in the meeting? Okay, if Maria is not in the meeting, I'll just continue and say welcome to everybody. Maria,
Maria?
I see your hand has been raised, Maria. Would you like to comment or something?
I think she's in the meeting.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Maria,
Good
yes,
morning,
we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I just joined as a panelist. I didn't have the rights to the mic. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. You can continue with your opening remarks, please.
Okay. Good morning, colleagues, participants, and our distinguished guests. I'd just like to say sorry for a bit of late start because due to electricity issues. My name is Maria Lesili, and I'm from the Council for Geoscience. But today I'm here on behalf of LIASA Special Library Committee. On behalf of the committee, I'm delighted to welcome you today to our information literacy webinar. Today, the webinar is all about information literacy, and as we currently live in an era where information is in abundance, we have a lot of information at our fingertips. So because of this, we need to find a way of navigating through this information. And this also requires critical skills. So the webinar today is designed to deepen our understanding and information literacy. I would also like to thank each and every one of you for joining the webinar. I know we're all busy and it's a Friday morning. It's a Friday today, but I would like to really thank you for joining the webinar, because without our participants and everyone who's here, we would not be able to do this. We also encourage you to actively engage with our presenter, who will be introduced by my colleague, Matilda Smith. And also, can you also please ask questions and share your insights on the topic, because the richness of this session lies in the exchange of knowledge and experience from all of us that are in the webinar, that has joined the webinar. With that, I would like to give over to Matilda to introduce our speaker. Thank you, Matilda.
Thank you very much for those welcoming words, Maria. We really appreciate and we are looking forward. Just a few technicalities. Can someone from the LIASA office just check that everybody, that the meeting is audible, because I see in chat that people are complaining that they cannot hear. So maybe people, if you can just quickly indicate who can hear us and who cannot hear us, that we can try and clarify the problem. And then another one, then the people are also asking, and I'm not tech savvy, so Maritsipi or someone from LIASA head office, people ask if the chat can be switched on. So if someone can just assist me with those technicalities, I would appreciate it very much. Okay, I hope someone will pay attention to that from the LIASA office. In the meantime, I am continuing by introducing our honorable guest speaker for today, Andiswa Mfengu. Andiswa is a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Town, where she leads the Department of Knowledge and Information Stewardship. She holds a PhD in Library and Information Studies from UCT. Her research focuses on developing a holistic framework for research impact assessment, particularly relevant for transformative and decolonizing context with Africa and beyond. She challenges traditional metrics, advocating for approaches that are context sensitive and reflective of diversity scholarly contributions. She is the immediate past chair for the Africa chapter of the Association for Information Science and Technology, and the past vice chair for the Library Education and Training Institutions section of the African Library and Information Association and Institution. Her expertise is recognized through her role on the editorial boards of the African Journal of Library, Archives and Information Science, and the Journal of Librarianship and Information Science. Me Andiswa, we are really looking forward to your to listen to you today. We are really excited as information literacy is a very important issue nowadays. So Andiswa, I give over to you and we would like to listen to you. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for the warm welcome, Matilda, and thank you to Liasa and especially Special Libraries for the invite. I'll share my slides, but I think just maybe in getting started, I mean, it's lovely to see so many people joining this morning session, and I know we scheduled for 2 hours, so I'm not sure from Liasa if one can assist. I mean, I would like to have the session more interactive. I don't think there's days one can have a session where you're presenting for that long. That we can see how we can have actually everyone engage, because I think that is actually quite important. Yeah, to engage and have a discussion around this. I don't think one can necessarily and I don't think I can act like an expert in this area. I think this is a great opportunity for all of us as we navigate these different spaces where we can learn from each other. So I'm really grateful for the invite, and yeah, lovely to see also so many familiar faces in the audience that are joining this session, and I mean certain people that actually have done such great work in this area. So I think it would be a great opportunity for all of us to learn. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and different spaces throughout the session. We will allow, I think, more, not just even putting them in the chat, but to allow engagement. I think different voices and perspectives are quite important in having such discussions rather than just myself speaking. And I'm also have one of my PhD candidates, students in the department who will be sharing some of the work he's doing around information literacy from their masters and currently now with their PhD. So please feel free to put your hand up to engage in the chat, and in different spaces. I've got questions. We have put together questions where actually it will be a space for all of us to engage and share different perspectives and dip in and back from in the presentation. So I'll be using my presentation this morning as a guide for actually having a discussion. How do we support our communities of critical thinkers? And I know, I mean, this is by special libraries, but it's not limited to special libraries. I would think this is broader and applicable across the different spaces that as librarians we operate in. So, and it will be lovely to hear those perspectives. And I think, I mean, from here, this is where we can create a community of practice. I know was a call already from Liasa in terms of putting together a community of practice. And I think this would also be a good opportunity to work towards that and creating a community of practice in this area, because I mean, I think it's a moving area, and the landscape is changing very much every day. I mean, with things like your AI, it's influencing how information literacy landscape is changing. And it's important that there is a community where we can apply and understand and probably come up with some best practices for our community and so on. So then, we'll probably jump right in, and hopefully we will all engage and learn together in this morning's session. And as I've been introduced, I'm Andis. I'm at the University of Cape Town, and I'm not an expert in this area, but this is one of the areas, I mean, with any library school or a school that we embed and we have in our curriculum. So I'm sharing some of the perspectives from the research that has also been done in the department, our students, as well as just what's happening in the literature, and also from there, how do we think critically around information literacy and how do we apply it in our context, where a lot of models, a lot of frameworks have been adopted from elsewhere. They're very Western. How does that look like, or how should that look like, information literacy in practice for our context in South Africa, in Africa, and so on. So I'm hoping as we look through today's session, we can adopt some critical lens and also how does that apply in our communities rather than how we've been doing it, because a lot of times we've been doing things for so long, but maybe they're not serving our communities well. Then how do we adopt a critical lens in terms of that to see how do we change things? How do we bring in that system change to ensure that we are responsive to the needs of our users? So just to get started then, this is what we'll be covering, just looking at information literacy in context. I think context is very important. And we are the social sciences and the humanities, and we cannot talk about any phenomena without talking about the context. I mean, we have to bring in the context of South Africa. We have to bring in the context of if one is based in Khayelitsha, Soweto, Cape Flats, Umlazi, in the different spaces. That context is important whenever we talk about any aspect in the social sciences and humanities. So we'll start just thinking around the context and how should information literacy look like in the particular context we exist in, and why does it matter? I mean, I think this is a question every librarian understands why it matters, but I think it's important that we still highlight it and raise even the awareness in case someone might not understand why in 2025 we're still talking about information literacy. Where I remember when I started in library school, this was something that we were talking about even then, but years later, we're still talking about it and it's still important and matters. Also, just looking at some of the frameworks that we utilize in research around information literacy, the criticism around the limitations in those frameworks, and what can we do as librarians in this space. And also, we'll talk about things like the critical information literacy, critical thinking, ethical use of information. We know this has come up quite a lot around AI, the responsible use of information. What is our role as librarians? What does that look like? I mean, I know as librarians, we wear many caps, many hats in our spaces that we are in, but what does that look like in terms of information literacy? What is that space that as librarians we should be filling? What's that gap that we should be closing as librarians? And also looking at what it means to be embedded in critical and ethical practice. Because a lot of it we are practicing in this space as librarians. What does that look like in practice? What can we do to change the status quo? And I think it's important to always end with a call to action. We go to so many webinars, conferences, and different events. But I think that the biggest question I always ask myself is now that we've had all this information, now that we've been exposed to all those different events, wonderful events, what are we doing? What has changed in our spaces because of us having been exposed to that knowledge, to those skill sets, and so on? So I thought it's important that we don't end this session with just we've heard ABC, we understand ABC, but what can we do? What can I do as a librarian in my space? What can I do as an individual who's interested or affiliated to this space? So that's what we'll look at, and I'm hoping we can engage and have discussions and so on. So please, if there's any things on the chat, you're welcome to stop me and we can engage with them as we go rather than having to wait till the end. So I'm happy to slot in the different questions and engagements as we move. So just to probably get started and to contextualize information literacy so that we're all on the same page. I mean, there's been many definitions of what it is, but I thought I'd just bring these two from CILIB, which is the Chartered Information Librarians Institute of Professionals based in the UK. And also, I think we know UNESCO. So CILIP has done great work around information literacy, which in 2018 they adapted what they understand of their definition of information literacy from the 2014 version, which it spoke around that information literacy is the ability to think critically. And I think later you'll understand why also, I mean, I think it's important to talk about critical thinking as part of information literacy rather than almost divorced out, that these two are interlinked, and it is when this is when actually literacy, information literacy becomes powerful when one brings in that critical aspect and critical thinking aspect. So it's the ability to think critically, make balanced judgments. And I mean, this is something we take for granted, but we've seen with COVID-19, with the different events, whether it's the elections, it's the floods, it's the looting, and in terms of what happened in Durban, how when at times individuals in our societies don't make the judgments around the information one receives, whether it is through a link, it is through our social media and so on, what happens in that case around your disinformation, misinformation, and so on. So it's important that when we view information literacy, it is from the lens where the individuals have to be able to make balanced judgments about any information one finds and uses, that I do not find information just because I maybe found it from Google. I trust it, that it is credible and so on. But rather, I have to use a balanced judgment. I need to ask certain questions. I need to be actively engaging with that information one is finding, rather than just being passive. That maybe because it's found from this journal, it's coming up from this news platform that I trusted, not necessarily. I mean, because we've seen certain cases where there has been questionable information, but has been published by so-called credible sources and so on. And also an aspect of also information literacy, it's the aspect of having it being able to empower citizens to develop informed views and to engage fully with society. I mean, we think around how now we use our phones for different places, whether one is to apply for employment, e-governance, banking, and so on. So this is where then we can engage fully, connect with family, friends. I mean, I look at what we're doing now. If it was many, many years ago, we would not have been able to connect via Zoom to have this session across South Africa and beyond. But also, I mean, we look at social media, the events we connect with colleagues and so on, and also how we can share in that space and influence others, and hopefully we can all join this meeting, I mean, seamlessly and so on. That speaks to aspects of information literacy where we take for granted until someone struggles, whether it's trying to share the different slides and so on. But that speaks to the whole holistically what information literacy is about, how we engage, find, use that information. And also UNESCO views information literacy as it empowers people in all walks of life to seek, evaluate, use, and create information effectively to achieve one's personal, social, occupational, and educational goals. So information, I mean, I know a lot of information literacy aspect has come from higher education and so on, but it should not be limited to that space. If I have a health need, I should be able to, because I have these skills, I have this knowledge, I should be able to know then what to do. Where do I find the right health related information? So it does not apply to one aspect of our lives, but it should cut across the personal, social, occupational, educational, and so on. And I think very critical in terms of the UNESCO's definition that information literacy, it is a basic human right because we understand we operate in a digital world, and for us to and for every individual in the society to have the social inclusion, it means one has to be information literate. We can have a computer, we can have the phone, we can have the internet, but if one cannot be able to do the search, if one cannot be able to find, one cannot be able to evaluate and use that information, we can see then already that we will not be participating in that digital environment or digital citizens in the same way or in an equitable manner. if there is those differences. So I think even just from this point of departure, when we look at information literacy, it cuts across a number of skills. We're talking about also where then computer literacy has to come in, digital literacy has to come in, media literacy, because that is also, I mean, we use ICTs to connect to the information in different spaces. And I think now this is why the space one will talk around multi-literacies, because there's a number of literacies that you can understand how to find, use information, but if you're still finding them traditionally how we used to in the library, going into the library, opening the card catalog, going to the stacks of books, one would be limited because a lot of the information these days is actually not physically in the library. It's everywhere, physically, online, and otherwise. And one still needs to be able to then find that information regardless of where it is and so on. So then just looking again in terms of information literacy, so obviously it incorporates a set of skills and abilities which everyone needs to undertake information related tasks. So I mean, that's why it's a human right. Even from kids at school level, they need to go find information for their homework, whether it's in the textbook and so on. So it's a set of skills, it's abilities. I mean, we use these skills and abilities every day in our workplaces to do certain tasks and different things like that. But also related to it, it concerns the application of the competencies, the attributes, the confidence needed to make the best use of information and to interpret it judiciously. So one can know certain things, one can have the certain skills and abilities, can understand how to find information and so on. But information literacy has to go a bit further where it includes the application of it. That knowing and understanding where to find it and where it is not enough. It incorporates more than just the knowing and the skills and the abilities where it goes to the application. I need to be able, as an individual that has found this information in the different spaces and so on, to apply it to whatever space I needed it from, and also being able to interpret it, use it as best possible. So that effective use of information is also a key aspect in terms of information literacy. And again, the aspects around critical thinking comes back again. It also doesn't just apply in concern to the application, but also it incorporates critical thinking. I mean, this is something we think it applies only in our workplaces or maybe in higher education and so on, but we take it for granted that even an individual, a business person, or someone just looking for employment, the importance of critical thinking when they interact with information in the different spaces. And also it's there's an aspect of it that looks at awareness, the understanding of both the ethical, political issues associated with using information. I mean, this is where we do not think that that the information we find is just neutral, where there is political aspects, there is issues that influence how that information even comes to us and gets distributed to us. When we think around the media and the different news stations and what they deliver and what they focus on. So one then has to have that critical thinking and awareness of how is that information we are receiving or searching for is influenced and affected to be able to use that information in a critical manner. And I think, I mean, it's important to know what it is, but I think when we're talking about practice, as why does it matter? Why should we care about it? Becomes a more critical question to interrogate. Obviously, it helps us to understand the ethical and legal issues associated with the use of information. I mean, this is on a bigger part, we know with the researchers, with us having to write certain scholarly works that we have to cite the authors, we have to cite the whoever first develop whatever piece of work. And I think this is where then, I mean, there's been lots of questions and debates around the different generative AI tools in terms of then how ethical is it that we take whatever we get from these tools and we just maybe cite that I used this particular AI tool. But then we know AI tools do not create new knowledge. This is coming from some articles. This is coming from some websites and so on. So then hence the many, I guess, conversations, concerns around the generative AIs and is because then, I mean, there's questions around the ethical and legal issues in terms of how one is using that information. And I mean, if AI tools, they're collecting information from our social media tools, did we give, as social media users that have accounts, a permission for those AI tools to actually collect the data and distribute it in whatever shape and form? So this speaks to yeah, issues of privacy. So information literacy is critical in terms of the issues of privacy, data protection, freedom of information, open access, open data, and intellectual property. But also, I think related to it and at the core of it is sorry, just one moment. So yes, so related to it is also just enabling the importance of enabling lifelong learning. We know, I mean, this is something as librarians that is very critical and important. My apologies. I think I might have enabled subtitles. Sorry. Yes, we don't want subtitles. Yeah, so yeah, students need it in terms of one having to finish off their assignments and so on. Employers, we know in the workplace, one needs to have information literacy. One has to have that critical aspect and being just an active participant in the digital space. Decision making, we need to make informed decisions where one is informed by some facts that actually can be trusted and have been tested that they actually, and yeah, they factual and there's evidence behind. And it's important for us, I mean, the information literacy, it helps us to develop critical thinking, and it's an empowering aspect. It empowers us as individuals in this global digital space that we connected to be inclusive, to participate in the different discussions, to participate like we're doing in this webinar, but also it contributes to creating a democratic, inclusive, and participatory societies. So I think that's why, I mean, in every space and with the new developments in technology, we have information literacy coming up again and again, because regardless of what's the technology, at the end of the day, that technology is almost a gateway for us to the information. And when we get to the information, we still need that information literacy. We can have the digital literacy, we can have the computer literacy, we can have a media literacy, but at the end of the day, that technology is linking us to the information, and hence information literacy over the years, however it's been packaged and so on, it's critical for students, for individuals in our communities, everyday life, employers, and so on. And related to just information literacy, I thought I'd just touch briefly on some of the frameworks that are there to understand information literacy, or how the different aspects of information literacy interact. And I think this is important to understand, because if one is doing research or one is thinking of certain programs in one's library, this is some of the frameworks that have been utilized. And what does that mean for us in the Global South, in South Africa, around these frameworks that have been developed elsewhere? Can we use them as they are? Do we need to adopt them? How do we bring in the context? Because I mean, you can imagine like the ACRL, which is the Association for College and Research Libraries Information Literacy Framework, that has been designed and developed in the US. What does that mean for us then if we use it in Cape Town, if we use it in Limpopo and Mpumalanga, Northwest, and so on? And also one of the popular ones that's utilized is the CILIP one, which is from the Chartered Institute for Library and Information Professionals in the UK. And UNESCO's one is actually not just information literacy, but also it brings in media, because it's seeing that space as being integrated rather than separated. So I will just touch briefly on some of these frameworks, and maybe we can think around how do they apply in our spaces, and what can we do about? So this is just a summary of the CELIP Information Literacy Framework. So the framework looks at 6 aspects. Sorry, 5 aspects actually. So it looks at just the application of information in everyday. How do people interact? Where do people find information online in everyday lives without having to have an assignment at work or having an assignment at school or having a project or something one is working on? But how do you, in our everyday lives, whether we're trying to understand where do I find the link to join this meeting? And do I need to download Zoom or can I just join via the browser? So just looking at information in everyday life and how does that look like? And also a second aspect, it looks at citizenship and helping people to understand the world around us. I mean, we talk about how we are all part of a global citizen. What does that look like? And how can someone, I mean, women in the rural villages somewhere in Nairobi connect to that, somewhere in Bumalanga? What does that citizenship mean for them in terms of information literacy and how they're connecting and how the technology and the spaces are allowing them to be part of that of that global village? But also a third aspect looks at education, and I mean we know a lot of those frameworks have come in because there's been great support from higher education institutions and education institutions to develop information literacy around our students. So looking at developing critical thinking skills at all stages of education, from school to higher education. And we know this has been a big space, but we know, I mean, we apply the information beyond just education, which I think that cuts across everyone, while education that is a limited group. And also the application of information in the workplace, how it contributes to employability. And I mean, this is something, especially in this point that we're in South Africa and Africa, how information literacy, I mean, we look at all the employment scams that are happening, that you wonder at times some people followed, there was some link, and then they followed the link and they end up in some deserted building, and you wonder, had maybe some of these younger people who are looking for employment, have they had the right information literacy knowledge and skills? Would they maybe have not clicked on that link? Would they maybe have not gone to that building, which is not even coming across as a business? And I mean, I think this also goes without saying, it would improve definitely the employability. I mean, we look at interviews and how people even craft their CVs and put themselves forward for that aspect. With the right information literacy skills, one obviously would do better. Even putting together, I mean, you're presenting that CV, presenting oneself in an interview and so on. But also, I mean, an important aspect is the health, finding reliable sources of health information. And I think, I mean, we're thinking around information literacy and health literacy very differently post-COVID-19, because we learned a lot around what happened and things we took for granted, that at times when we see information online, we don't take it at face value. And if I'm not a virologist or a vaccine specialist, I should not be giving information or even advice around that. Hence, there were so many theories around COVID-19, but I think at the core of it, there was the lack we realized in our communities. There was very limited information literacy skills, which allowed some of this misinformation and disinformation to spread even further. So this just, yeah, the
Andiswa,
CELIP, sorry, go ahead.
sorry for interrupting.
No worries.
Yes, just a question. Someone asking with regard to information literacy, what is the importance of AI in the working society? If you maybe can elaborate
Thank
on
you
that
very
one.
much. Thank you very much for that, Matilda. I think it's a very important one. I mean, I think we cannot be talking about information literacy without thinking around AI. Because I mean, a lot of spaces now, and even a lot of individuals, they will not go to your Google. They will not even consider Google Scholar. They'll probably go to ChatGPT, Copilot, different spaces, and so on. I think the same principles one would apply in information literacy, where one has to critically, look at what's the authority, evaluate the information we are getting before you apply it anyway. The same principles would apply in terms of AI. Because in essence, this is information. So the generative AI tools, they're bringing out, you type in a prompt and they're giving some information. So I would expect that in terms of being critical citizens, that one is able to apply the same skills, the same understanding, information literacy skills and competencies to critique that information before we apply it in the different spaces. And then we won't fall into the trap of actually, where the information is probably inaccurate, because then as an active individual and citizen who is information literate, it is my responsibility to realize that ChatGPT is just looking through the internet. It's just trained to sieve through huge amounts of data, but it does not discriminate where that data is coming from. How do I know the credibility of that? So it is my responsibility then as a librarian, as an individual, to be critical of that information and not just apply it and use it however it might, however it looks. And I think this is where then in the academic space there has been detectors for AI and so on. I know there was a lot of inaccuracies, which I know with the University of Cape Town from October, we will not be using any detectors because it raises other issues. Where if I've used things like your grammar check and so on, it still picks up as an AI because it says that normally as people, we don't write in that perfect manner and so on. But then, we know we would advise our students to use grammar checks and so on. So I think for me, it's the same skills. We're applying it in different spaces, the same information literacy skills. We're applying them in different spaces and so on. And happy to take more questions as they come. So this is another framework. So ACRL, which is a US-based Association for College and Research Libraries, which looks at information literacy from these different frames. It uses the 7 frames to capture what information literacy would look like with looking at things like authority is constructed and contextual. And I think, I'm glad they captured the context again, that who is authority and how do they get recognized as authority when we're looking at an information, we're saying, oh, okay, what's your authority when you were writing this piece of work? That actually the whole authority is constructed and contextual. So so then the information resources that one is trying to access, it reflects, the creator's expertise, their credibility, and also has to be evaluated and has to be evaluated based on the need and the context in which the information will be used in. That something at times that might be relevant for maybe when I'm doing a news article might not be so relevant when I'm now trying to do an academic article. So this is where then that evaluation based on the need and the context and how that information will be used, where then one would look at the creator's expertise and that authority. And we know authority, in terms of the information sources, is created in different spaces and various communities, and different communities would recognize different types of authority, where if in a community space, we know our traditional leaders, they are authority in that space. So then it's important to bring in that context and how the authority is constructed. But also another aspect with this framework is that information creation is seen as a process. Let's just look at, information. We know it comes in various formats, which are produced to convey a message, and that is shared via different methods. And this is where then researchers would use that information, and we would use it in our workplaces in various ways and so on. And the third one looks at information has value. This looks at just, looking at information as a commodity, and whether it is in terms of an education space or whether then this is used to influence in different spaces, but understanding the value that it has, whether it's from a legal, socio-economic space and so on. And that production and that dissemination of information would work along, depending on what that value and what that space looks like. But also looking at research as an inquiry. And I mean, you can also see just in terms of how also this is conceptualized, a lot of it looking at your higher education space. Would it apply in a different spaces outside of higher education? I don't necessarily think it would apply without any adaptation. This particular framework, one would have to adapt it. So this looking at the research process being iterative, depending on what questions one is asking and the complexities and who answers, who in turn answers those different questions, and so on. And then the next aspect looks at scholarship is a conversation. I mean, this goes without saying that, I mean, in terms of a research space, where as a scholar, one could write a piece of work, there's professionals that engage with that scholarship, and there might be critique, there might be further studies, different discoveries. So it is, it's a sustained discourse that happens between scholars, practitioners, and so on. And how that is interpreted would differ depending on the different perspectives, how we all interpret the same piece of information or piece of scholarship. And the seventh and last one looks at searching as being strategic. And this is, I mean, goes without saying, you know, if we look at in our library school and what we do that, I mean, searching and how we find information is not linear. It's a non-linear process, and it is iterative, and it requires the evaluation. And sometimes we have to change the questions we're asking. We have to change our search terms. And luckily, I mean, when we look in our libraries these days, we can do natural language searching without having to do your typical Boolean searching and so on. And yeah, so then there's that iterative process and going back and almost cyclical form in terms of looking at this framework. And a lot of it, I mean, some of these aspects and frames would not apply in terms of the different spaces that our libraries exist in, while it might be closely inclined with what happens in your higher education institutions. And now this is the UNESCO one, which looks at media and information literacy together. And it crafts or puts together the different things as laws, that it's grounded around 5 laws. And obviously, I mean, UNESCO is much broader, not focused on any discipline or any space. So it looks at different laws in terms of how the information in terms of our libraries, archives and the different spaces and information providers, that the information is for critical and civic engagement. So we're not creating the information just to sit in our libraries or in our spaces, but it is for the public, it is for the civic, it is for the layperson in our communities to access that information, and that there has to be equal access. So speaking again, coming back to whether information literacy being a human right, that everyone should have access to that regardless of, I guess, financial status and different things like that. And also, I mean, there's different laws with the second law looking at every citizen is a creator of information. So we're not just passive users of the information, but also we are part of creating the information. And then it's important that each user, each citizen is empowered to access the new knowledge, to be able to express themselves, create new knowledge, and so on. Looking at the third law, and looks at information knowledge messages are not always value neutral or independent of biases. And I think this is something that's critical, that as librarians, as people who curate and manage all this information, that we understand that I mean, I think the notion of neutrality, gone are those days. We think that the systems we use, the information we curate is neutral. It is actually filled with a lot of biases, depending on also, I mean, we know a lot of the systems, they're very Western centric. And what does that mean for indigenous knowledge and systems in our countries, in our spaces, and so on? And so then it's important, that whole transparency and awareness, so that one can be able to critique that information from our systems. And the fourth law looks at every citizen wants to know and understand new information, knowledge and messages, as well as communicate even if one is not aware, admits or expresses that he or what they've done, and also the rights must, however, never be compromised. So this is where, I mean, we know when we look around information seeking behavior and so on, some people can ignore information. It is there, but they refuse to actually engage with that. Then this is where then in our spaces as librarians, it's important that we make them aware, even though someone might be almost ignoring that particular sort of information, but at least to allow them to make informed decision in the different spaces. And also the fifth law looks at how media information literacy is not acquired at once. I mean, we talk about lifelong learning. It is a lived and dynamic experience and process that, I mean, I think some of the skills, a lot of us got in library school over the years, we've had to reinvent ourselves. We've had to learn different things. And I think this is why we are here again. Where there's continuous professional development, because we understand it is a changing space and it's dynamic, and we need to keep moving and reinventing ourselves to be able to partake and actively be part of this global space. And I mean, there's been there is criticism around these frameworks, and a lot of the frameworks that we use as scholars and even as librarians at times, they actually have been developed elsewhere, and at times we use them without adaptation or without critique. We use them as they are. And a lot of these, I mean, the CILIP one probably might not apply in the context in the UK. What happens if I apply it in South Africa? What happens if I apply it in the Cape Flats and so on? Can it still apply in that context and so on? So this is where then a lot of them, they do not think around the factors that influence how we find, how we access information and so on. And also they Western centric. I mean, it's the US, it's UNESCO, it is CILIP. Those are all not from the global north. And also looking at the ones like ACRL, that is also very higher education focused, where we're focusing around what do our students, but we never really think around, I mean, the users of the public libraries, which is different people, whether in employment or not, retired or not, where they actually are the biggest users of our libraries, especially your public libraries. What frameworks are we putting in there? As public libraries, we know one has to engage in the space. What frameworks are we putting in there? I mean, I know in the space there's colleagues coming from research councils, they're coming from schools of governance. That is not students, that is researchers, that is practitioners in different spaces. What does that information literacy as librarians supporting them in that space? What does that look like? And what can we put together in terms of that space? Are there any questions or comments before I maybe proceed to the space? And I have a few questions myself in the next coming slides. Just checking in if there's any before we go through.
I do not see any
Cool.
questions at this moment, but if one wants to pop a question quickly, please do so.
Thank you very much, Matilda. I'll probably just do a few slides and then we'll have a session with, I have a few questions that I'd like us to engage in. But I mean, I think an aspect that has come up in the literature more recently is around critical information literacy. And basically what it's all about. I mean, there's been great work that's also just been done around critical cultural literacy and how that is important, that we also have cultural literacy. And when we talk about diverse cultures that we come in, but for specifically around critical information literacy, it considers the socio-political dimensions of information, how the production of knowledge occurs. And this is where then it encourages us not just being passive users or utilizing the information in our spaces, but then we be able to critique and understand the production system, not just how we get to access whatever information in our different databases our library subscribe to, but also how does our production look like, and looking at the socio-political. It also critiques around how our systems of power shape the creation, distribution, and the reception of information. I mean, isn't that the challenges we are having again with our AI? that we were the same ones we had around our big databases in our libraries, your Scopus, your Web of Science, and now we've got your big, OpenAI and so on. These systems are trained with westernized data, and obviously the responses, whatever we get from our prompts, it will depend on the data that informs them or the data that they've been trained on. What happens then to indigenous representation, our indigenous languages, in cases where then they can't access the records in isiXhosa because they don't even understand that language, in isiZulu, Setswana, Siswati, and so on. What happens in that case then? Are we saying then that our languages we probably don't have, we don't contribute to this knowledge space because a lot of the systems they designed very pro-English and so on. And also, when we look at critical information literacy, it acknowledges that libraries are not and cannot be neutral actors. There is dominant powers that shape how the information is created. And this is where then, as libraries, we have to be critical and we have to be aware and resist some of these powers, actually. And also, I think take an intentional and advocate for indigenous knowledges and advocate for indigenous languages and how we see this space and also support our many users in our libraries. And also then this is where, sorry, go ahead.
So, sorry, Andiswa,
No
this
worries.
is now a question from myself.
Mhm.
This remark as acknowledges that libraries are not and cannot be neutral actors. I kind of have a question about it,
Mhm.
because how am I not supposed to transfer this information in a neutral format, and then it's the user's own responsibility to interpret it? Am I allowed to give my view, whether it is a social view, a political view, or whatever view will tap into this? Can I convey it to the user, or should I just convey the information?
Thank you for that, Matilda. I think it raises very, I guess, critical issues because then, in my views, whether religious, whether, culturally and so on, I don't think we see them as having to drive now. Imagine in our libraries in South Africa, like big libraries and so on, that becomes very tricky and interesting. And I guess probably will create a lot of uncomfortable and unhappiness and so on. But I guess what the statement is saying, whether as the librarians in those spaces, we just deliver what we get from our systems. In essence, what we're delivering to the users, that is actually what the dominant practices of the West. We already in that way, we are actually, I guess, in a way, supporting these dominant practices. Where we look around the decolonial project, this is where we're saying, actually, this is not how, there's other ways of doing things. There's different ways of knowing. And by us just buying or saying that, we need to buy from these reputable places for our journals and so on. And when we have a journal somewhere in our region and so on, and it's not indexed in Scopus, it's not indexed in Web of Science, I don't think we are neutral. We are actually supporting the Western ways of knowing. We are continuing to purchase those and we're continuing to subscribe to those certain ways. While I know, open access journals, newer journals, on the other side, they are actually struggling because we're saying, oh no, we're not sure. Oh, they're coming from India, they're coming from Nigeria, they're coming from South Africa. So I don't think we've ever been neutral. However, I think we've conformed to what makes sense with the systems that we found. And I think this is where then we're saying, well, I might share that information, but I'm actually going to tell it's important that one is critical, one understands the knowledge production, and then we let the users have the judgment. But without them understanding the scholarly communication space, just saying, well, this is what there is, then we're not giving them an opportunity also to be critical around that information and so on. And how then are we becoming catalysts of change? Are we going to continue with the status quo, even though it might not be working out for our communities and so on? I've seen a number of hands coming up. I will probably just pause there and we can engage with those, Matilda. I've seen there's a hand from Ketla. There's a number of hands actually. I'm not sure, Matilda, how we do the hands.
That's exactly what I'm also sorry, people, for not. I saw that I can unmute people, but now I can't see their hands to unmute them. So maybe I'm very sorry, people. Can you please post your questions in the question box or the chat box? It seems to me that way it will be easier, as I do not see, or if someone from head office can please just chip in, or Maritipi, if you can chip in and just assist us to let the people ask their questions.
Good day, colleagues. Thank you, Matilda. I also can't see the hands. I can't see the hands. I don't know why Dr. Mfengu is seeing and then we cannot see. Thank you so much.
I
So
did see some. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I also did see a few hands going up, but now if I want to unmute them on their names, I don't know. Or if you can just put your name in the chat, in the chat box, then I have to unmute you, then we can try that.
Yes.
But just put your names in the chat box, please.
Sorry,
Then
I
we'll
saw the names popping up. I also I'm trying to find if we can unmute the people that had their hands up.
if you click on participants, there is a button saying allow to talk next to
Yes.
everyone, but I need the names to do that. So yeah.
I saw just a hand now. I think I saw your hand, Janusz, if you want to go through, and we'll keep finding everyone.
Okay, Janu's question is, we need to be more active in improving accessibility to library material. We live in a multilingual society that we are not actively supporting. I'll also try to unmute him.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, I think, just reinforce what Dr. Mfengu was saying, that we do need to be active, I feel. And part of, if we are going to embrace the decolonizing of our academic libraries, this is a role that we actively need to play. I also understand how we've always kind of positioned ourselves as neutral in the information delivery side of our service, where we try and not influence our users or want to remain neutral. But I think in this day and age, and with what is this active disinformation society that we are living in, I think we need to become a little bit more active in trying to what's the word I'm looking for? Try to overcome or support users more effectively. But so really, it's not quite a question. It's more just a vote of support for this position.
Thank you very much, Janusz. I'm not sure, we're trying to locate the different hands. If anyone, we see the name popping up, we'll probably just allow you to share. I'm not sure if there's anything on the chat, or maybe we continue.
There's one comment saying, I also think that it's not interpreting the information for users, but make them aware that the sources may be doubtful.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I see, Kesha, you wanted to say something. Sorry, you can unmute. Mahlangu.
Okay, thanks very much. Am I audible? I think
Yes,
so.
you are.
I can see my name popping up there. I'm Mahlangu from the University of Venda in Limpopo. So I'm teaching information literacy to first-year students. So I just want to support what Dr. Mfengu has just indicated about, or even the model about librarians not being the neutral actors. And what I'd like to add is that the biasness does not only come at the initial stage of acquiring information sources, but even later. I'll just give an example of where a user is looking for information source. Let us say an article where, as an information librarian, you've got to extract an article from a journal for the user. I think your biasness would still come in there. You would not, if you've got a number of articles which are on the same subject, but there are those that are in one way or another not aligning with your culture, you're very likely, naturally so, to only dispatch the ones that are in line with your culture, because now you are biased, you are critically engaging, you are like analyzing for the user and not just taking what is available and give to the user to critically engage the article. Yet another example, a simple one, is where if somebody would ask you for a direction, you're likely, even if there are a number of routes, you're likely to recommend. You're not saying there are 5 options to go to town. You can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But then you find yourself recommending the one that works for you, the one that you like. So what I'm saying is that the biasness does not come only when you source out the resources, when you purchase resources, but even at a later stage when now you are engaging with the user. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahlangu. I think that really speaks, to the space that we exist in, and I think this is where the critical aspect is important. We are not. I think of what our libraries purchase and have. In essence, that's what the researchers would use, and that's what us as teachers we will recommend. If it's not in the library, it's unlikely we'll go purchase it out of our pockets and so on. So then, already by that space, what is available, what is accessible. It kind of directs how the scholarship and the information goes and so on. Thank you very much. And we'll just probably touch on a few things and then we'll hopefully have more areas for engagement. And I'm also seeing Buddy and others in the chat sharing quite useful ways, and I guess also practices in the different spaces around where at times I think that there is the neutrality of some biases that are there in our systems. And I think I agree fully. We should avoid those biases, but we know they do exist. So I think that awareness and engaging with is quite a starting point, and I think that's why we are here. And just looking at critical information literacy informed by critical theory, which looks at identifying forms of oppression in the system and dominant powers and taking action against those, finding ways to engage local communities against all those different forms of oppression. And it applies in different spaces, whether it's in theory and how we do our research, in practice, how we do information literacy training, instruction, and so on. And how do we resist these dominant modes of information production, dissemination, and use? I know how in terms of UCT with the special collections, it used to be quite popular because those was kind of scholarship that was not accessible elsewhere. And with, that and the fire, we know now there's been quite a lot of outcry, especially around researchers in the social sciences and humanities, because those were valuable pieces. If you needed to critique or write something around Africa, where you would only get those resources then what happens now? Because then it's also then the kind of scholarship that we're producing will be dependent on what is available and so on. Yeah, so I mean, this is just some of the aspects in terms of critical information literacy. So looking at the issues around power and ideologies, how the political, economic, and social forces shape information dissemination and production, the importance of agency and voice, encouraging individuals, our users in our communities to see themselves as active participants in knowledge creation, not just passive consumers. I mean, I'm glad to see some of our students and even librarians, just how what they share in their social media and using that to inform practice, because then that is where, I mean, I think our communities are quite active and they have a voice, and we can emphasize or highlight those sometimes marginalized voices in terms of the traditional information production space. And also looking at then bringing things like social justice to challenge issues of racism, sexism, ableism, and I mean, looking at your systemic oppressions within our systems, and also just going beyond the skills. That when one looks at information literacy, we're not just looking how do we search, how do we access the databases, but we go beyond and looking at when we do library instruction in terms of why does it matter for us to search in this particular way, or for us to access this information, and who benefits from this certain information flows. Why do we utilize more of your proprietary or resources behind paywalls instead of open access, and who benefits in that system and so on. And I thought then it would be important also just to bring in critical thinking in this space. It is, I mean, looking at critical, just even the definitions around information literacy, it centers a lot around critical thinking and how critical thinking needs to be centered. And in today's digital jungle, as people would call it, where there's misinformation and it spreads faster than any facts, we understand the importance of critical thinking as a compass that will help us to navigate that chaos. And as librarians, as we navigate that chaos, also help our users, our students, I mean, our different members in the community, whether young or old, digitally literate or not, where they can navigate that space. And also, I mean, when we look at it, it is not, this is a skill that is not just a nice to have. This is I mean, it's a human right. It's essential for everyone in our communities to actually have critical thinking as part of information literacy. And within that, we can see critical thinking as able to transform information literacy from just being that checklist where we say, oh, look at the authority, the accuracy, the timeliness of the work, and so on, where it becomes an active role. It's a mindset where whatever we receive, you see a link shared in the WhatsApp group, that before I click it, before I follow that email that says I've won some money when I never entered a competition. So this becomes a whole mindset where we are critical and we are not just passive consumers of the information, but we're actually active participants. And I think that would do a social change and a big shift in ourselves as practicing librarians, but also when we look into our communities, if we can have critical thinking embedded and as part of what we do in information literacy. And yeah, this is what just, I mean, looks at what it looks like to when we're evaluating our sources to have critical thinking and not. So we're questioning the biases, who funded that particular research and that work. What was the intent? Was it to market? Was it to sell or to advocate for a certain aspect? Or it was providing a balanced view in terms of whatever argument, rather than accepting authority at face value. It looks at analyzing language, evidence, in terms of that work. And I mean, we've heard since so many times around the digital media, the clickbaits, the fake news, where you actually click on something that has nothing to do with whatever title and so on, where we're able to recognize then the manipulation and the propaganda. And I thought we could do a number of questions that I'd like us to have, to engage in and have a look at. I mean, how do we define information literacy in our context? We come from different sectors and so on. and what are those potential opportunities and challenges in our spaces. I think that's something as a community we could help us to work forward and to work towards, I guess, changing things and making sure that the systems work better, but also looking at whose knowledge is privileged in our users' information system and the information systems that we use, whose knowledge is privileged and whose voices are marginalized. How do we center indigenous knowledges in our indigenous languages? Can I go as an Afrikaans speaker, as a Xhosa speaker, Setswana and Khoi, go to the library and still find the resources or even just instructions in my own language so that I can be able to know how to use the library catalog, the whatever system that the library uses. And also, I guess, looking at what our role as librarians and information specialists, how does our role go beyond providing just the access? I think we've been doing access, and I think that's what we're known for, providing that gateway to all those many sources. How do we then, I guess, move from that role towards enabling critical engagement with information? What does that space look like as librarians? And I guess, yeah, this is just questions I'm hoping we can engage with and so on. And
Diswa, do you see that
sorry.
one in the chat box? Adebisi says information flow. How does it affect AI in the digital divide?
Yes, no, thank you for that question, Adebisi. Yeah, so information flow and how does it affect AI and digital divide? I mean, I think with all the inequalities that we have in our systems, and we know AI tools, if you want more out of them, you need to subscribe to, and so on. So already we know there's big issues. I think AI has come with great developments and achievements, but we know it is also just widening the gap between the ones that have and the ones that have not, which I mean, we saw that also with the information technologies and so on. So I think that's a reality we have to grapple with. And this is where then equity becomes quite critical as individuals are functioning in these spaces. But the information flow aspect is I think it's a critical one, that whatever AI systems we are using, they are trained, they are working on whatever information is available to them or has been made available to them by the different companies, I mean, that have developed this system. So already there is biases embedded in that. And I mean, I know I would think we've been into so many sessions around AI, the issues of biases, the issues of ethics, in terms of the systems where it is going to reflect the values, the culture of whoever is developing those systems. And we know this is Western. And it is going to also reflect the language of whoever is training or investing in the systems. And we know also that just means English. And the rest of our languages, then where we look at it, I mean, if you go to Google Scholar, there's even other works that are published in other languages. But because our system does not understand that, so then you are limiting. It's almost that we've got this huge information available, this big circle out there, but then the AI tools will only see even just a small zoom into just a small aspect of that. And if I'm not being critical, I'm thinking, well, I've got access to everything. No, it's actually just a small aspect that's accessible and that the systems have been trained to where they can actually access. And that's not a holistic view. So there is, I mean, I think various issues where then I think it's important that we are part of those conversations as librarians in terms of the systems, because then we will have the systems in our libraries with our users and so on. And it's important we are part of the design questions and conversations rather than coming in later at the end as just the users of the systems and so on.
Diswa, if I may, I want
Yes.
to ask a question, but I want to be a bit backwards now. You have posted question 1, 2, and 3. I would like to start at question 3, and I want to put it even further, not as librarian or information specialist, but as mother, as caretaker, because what I've seen is in your younger children, especially at school, they are asked to do, let's call it an assignment, but they're just there to rewrite the information. They're not supposed to be critically thinking about the information. And then from secondary school, they go to university, and then there's a huge gap. They do not know how to be critical on the information because they haven't had the opportunity to be critical evaluating the information. So I think as librarians, as information specialists, as mothers, as caretakers, as whoever, we should start the process much earlier, and especially with this information overload and that by clicking that you are telling said about, that we have to make children aware of what they are dealing with. I mean, if we think back, we had the choice of 1 or 2 books, and mostly the books were credible sources. But now we really have to get the children's attention and say, we have to chat about this information that you have received before you can just use it.
Thank you, Matilda. I think you raised quite a critical aspect. It is in everyday life. How do we navigate those spaces, and how do we, I guess, create opportunities where we can talk around these issues and develop, I guess, that critical mind and critical aspect for the children, the elderly, and developing that in everyday life. Because then I don't think any parent, I don't think any one is going to be there when someone gets to interact with information that might be questionable. But then this is where then we are hoping we all have the skills, the abilities to say, well, no, this cannot be correct. I cannot follow this link, even if it might be coming from someone I know and so on. I think this might be a scam. And things like that. So definitely, I think it's in everyday lives, we actually should be advocating and raising awareness around these aspects. And I think this is where then we can curb issues of misinformation, disinformation, and so on. And yes, thank you for that comment, Nobuhle, around our role as librarians, providing access to information, helping our users to think critically. I think that's an important one. And I see Kwaida's hand. I'll just allow you, Kwaida, just now. I think you should be able to unmute.
Yes, I'm able to unmute. Hi, everyone, and thank you,
Hi,
Dr.
Kwaida.
Mfungu. I couldn't agree more with this, and also just to add on the last speaker's comment. You know, in my study to begin with, I advocate for public libraries to bridge the information literacy gap to the primary school learners and high school as well, you know, just to close that gap, because my observation is that in tertiary, I'm in an academic library, there are students here who don't have information literacy skills. They have access to information, but they don't have the ability to use the information, you know, they're finding online. So now we go beyond just providing access. We teach them how to use that information critically. You know, for example, using the CREP, the currency, you know, is it also relevant to what you are working on, and the authority who published this information, and for what purpose, you know, things like that. So also AI has, you know, reinforced the need to go just beyond really accessing information to teaching them to use it critically to make better decisions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kwaida. I think you raised quite an important one, where in essence, I mean, the work that we're talking about at higher education and so on, it starts very early on. And I think at times this is where then we are, when they get to university, unfortunately, the university finds them in whatever state and has to do the redo or do the work. But the damage is done. And I think it comes there with also Matilda, what Matilda was saying. this work has to happen quite early on. I mean, I know in high school, I had a sister already, the teachers had picked up there that they were using AI in high school. This is before even they get to varsity, using AI for their assignments. And by the time they get to varsity, they've learned certain habits and so on. So it has to start very early on in life, that critical thinking, that information literacy. And I think this is where then everyone is hoping that public libraries are doing it, and public libraries are hoping the schools are doing it, and the schools are hoping the parents are doing it in the different spaces. But we see there is no dedicated space or or platforms where these young people should be getting the skills, because by the time they get to first year, it's quite busy and they're overwhelmed with the studies, that hence they fall into the traps of using the AIs without any critical thinking and so on. I'll quickly run through some slides. I'll try and give us a few minutes, some time at the end. And I also have one of my students that has done some work in this space. I'd be glad if they could share. So probably not touch around this ethical use of information. I think this is something we know, and I think it's very critical, especially around AI tools, because then one wonders where that information is coming from. I mean, sometimes they give you some sources, but at times you know this is where then they hallucinate and actually you check it and you're like, no, it's actually not coming from those particular sources. And I saw her, and we'll just take Joyce, I think, a hand just in the in a moment. We'll take more hands. And yeah, so I mean, I think it was lovely just what has been shared around the role of the librarian. And I could not agree uh, yeah, I agree fully with what everyone has said. It is important, essential to what we do. And I guess not just as librarians, as big sisters, as big brothers, as siblings, and so on, that we have this role, and it speaks to Ubuntu, that in the spaces where we are in, we equip, we and yeah, we empower. We empower those that are around us because we know better. We advocate, support, and enable the information literacy, training, and skills. I mean, we know librarians in the different spaces, whether in higher education institutions. This is something one does around the library instruction and so on in public libraries. A big aspect in terms of supporting public library users around everyday life uses of information literacy, whether it's the formal or informal settings in health spaces, health practitioners, health librarians, and ensuring that, I mean, the information that gets passed to the clinicians and for evidence synthesis, that that information is accurate, because then we might have a wrong diagnosis, because we know that it is life changing. If you get them in a wrong diagnosis, we know that the the risk that exists in that space. So I think as librarians, I mean, our roles keep changing. We keep being added and getting more responsibilities. But I think at the core of it, we suppose I would think we should be facilitating. We should be advocating for these skills. We should be educating. Are we trained to be educators? No, but I think everyone in their spaces, because you know something that your other community does not. We end up being the trainers, we end up being the educators, and so on. And see, Joyce, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, and so from my side, I wanted to find out, as we offer this information literacy training to our undergraduate students, what, in your view, what type of content, can we include just to ensure that we develop them to be work-ready graduate innovators and mostly focus on entrepreneurship?
Thank you very much for that, Joyce. And I know there's a lot of librarians in the space that should be probably better suited to even answer that. I know we've got, yeah, a lot of, so I'm opening it up to the room, that it's actually not just limited to myself, but I think for me, it's a lot of what I've seen. It's starting where the users are at. We want so much to be academic. We want so much to be taking the ACRL framework, to be taking the CILIP framework, and so on. And at times, then this is where we do the library instruction, but then the students are still wherever they were because we're not starting from where they're and we're not meeting our users where they're at. I mean, there's certain things that apply in South Africa. So like if even someone comes and brings in examples that have dollars and you're like, we actually use rands. So it's starting where the users are at. We talk about, I mean, everyone these days, you know, someone that got scammed. Whether it was employment scam, it was their bank got cleared and so on, and different scams. That is a good point of departure. Maybe we don't see where someone has not referenced or has plagiarized some work, but I think starting where they're at and integrating those and how you influence, I guess, teach those different skills, but starting from where they are and using examples that are relevant and contextually make sense to the users and so on. And maybe if any others have comments or would like to come in, that would be a good opportunity. But maybe we'll take Berenice first.
I don't know,
Hi.
I forgot about me. Hi. I'm actually I was trained
I think we might be losing
as
you.
a like can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Oh, I was one of those first librarians who did the BBBL degree, which qualified me immediately as a school librarian, and that was in the 90s. You know, and what I found, I mean, and it was my desire to work in that field, but because again of my disability, I never got a full-time job, permanent job in the library, in educational in that basic education. So I managed to get a post at Heidelberg College, and I was just here for a year, and then I started with the information literacy. And what I found in all the students, no matter who they were, whether they passed with a good, they were not literate in how to get information those years. So because of my basic, the time when I was doing, not permanent post, but a temporary position, I could apply that. So I would first start with find out what they know before I actually start as to, teach them and I still, to be quite honest, I shouldn't tell you, but like I've been doing the schools now in 24 years, and I was doing I'm actually the catalog as well because we're not a big library, but when they took my course away, and I feel so. But they are planning something else. But what I'm saying is that I'm listening, so it is not our school. If they didn't take away our school libraries in our on the Cape Flats, because I'm from the Cape Flats, our kids might have had a better chance when they come to our higher education. And as you say, um, information literacy starts at that basic. If it doesn't start at your home, at least it should have started at schools. And I realized I was talking to my boss and saying to her, we even here at Heidelberg College will have to change my way of teaching and incorporate. When she was talking about what they're planning to do, I made it a point to say, I want to be part of that, because sometimes, not always, but sometimes we are excluded, and people, they make their own decision. And I don't know, I will die until the day I die, or the day I go on pension. I will information literacy will be my I'm very passionate about that, and disability, of course. Because I'm disabled, and I wanted to mention them when you were talking about the cultural, and I think, what about the person with the disability? They are being, and I'm not just talking about higher education, overall in our society in South Africa, they are left behind, and they are being neglected by the schools, and especially by the public libraries. I'm now being very negative towards the public library, because they are disabled people who are living in homes, or not even able to get to libraries. And what happened is, one thing that used to be years ago, I don't want to bring back apartheid, because we are, but there's mobile libraries. Now the disabled, the person with a disability, are now totally excluded, and they can't even get to a public library. So they are, I mean, and we at the moment now, it's like, just like at the moment, I'm not sure, but we are fighting in the Western Cape about, we as disabled community are fighting for our right to transport, and we won the case so far. So I wish someday that we can actually go to court, we to get government or whoever library to
Thank you
have
for that.
established libraries. You know, yeah, I'm talking too much. I need to give you,
No, thank you very
but
much.
thank you very much, Doctor.
No, thank you very much, Bernice. I think we appreciate also just the different perspectives and voices. And I think you raise very important points. And I think, the inclusivity part has been something that I think we might have made, certain progress, but I think as libraries, and I think as just the society, there's
Yes,
lots of
yes.
work we are behind in terms of what is inclusivity? What does that look like from the different, for people, persons living with disabilities and so on? We definitely have lots of work. And I think as libraries, I mean, we talk about literacy, but that would have to look differently depending on who is in the environment, who is in the community, and so on. And I hear your concerns, and I guess also we talk about how we should all be engaging and in this community where there's all these barriers. That it's important that we address those barriers, and hopefully, all of us in our different spaces, depending on our capacities, we can try to just make be equitable, be inclusive in the different spaces. If we're talking about information literacy, how do we train it to our individuals with different abilities and so on? What does that look like to accommodate different users and so on? And I think also, at the core of some of the challenges we are seeing around the literacies is the role that the void that gets that was left by the lack of school libraries. A few of our students might go to the public library, but I think at the core of it, they will not, because it's not compulsory, it's not expected, and so on. This is where then the school libraries has the role, because then you could have a session where everyone goes to the library, everyone has to read a book, whatever that looks like. So I know school libraries, we're hoping with the different ministers that could be better funded, and actually we can have more of our of functioning school libraries. And I think just in answering, I think in addressing the question Joyce asked, you touched on it in terms of what you do in practice with your college, just looking at, we're not assuming the students come knowing nothing, that they actually know quite a lot. And we might know different things to them. And how do we make use of their knowledge and what they know from their communities in now looking at information literacy, in learning the different information literacy skills and so on. And I think that's a good pedagogy starting from where they are at. So I hope, Joyce, you are covered. I see Twitter. You can go ahead, Twitter. I think you should be able to unmute.
Thank you, Dr. Vengo. Very thought-provoking comment from Berenice. It was not even something I was going to comment on, but I was going to comment on the teaching part as librarians. Are we teachers, by profession or not? No, we're not by profession. However, it's interesting to see how the LIS school specifically is responding to the change in our field. This got me thinking of my master's journey at UCT. I did a course in teaching and learning for LIS professionals, which equipped me with the teaching and learning theories, which I believe that gives me authority as a librarian to teach in the context of libraries, and there it also includes teaching and learning theories like constructivism, something Berenice also mentioned, starting with what our library users already know and building on that, and designing relevant content and delivering it accordingly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaita. And yeah, thank you for all the engagement. I'd probably not go back to the script and so on. I think, there's very good discussions and just, I think from us working in our different spaces, the whole point of this webinar was to start the conversation, but also bring in the different perspectives. Definitely, I don't think we can say we are teachers. That's a whole profession. One has to study to be called a teacher. But I think there is a whole concept around teacher librarian, where we understand as librarians that we have certain skills and knowledge that we can impart on our users. Hence, then we can be teacher librarians where we are imparting or instruction, whatever we want to call that. But I think I think we're one of the longest professions that we've actually been teaching. We might not have been calling it, might have been calling it training, equipping, and so on. And I think more recently, this is where then I think libraries are recognizing the importance of having librarians that also are trained as teachers. Because then, it's like how we're getting librarians that are trained as computer scientists and so on. We've seen the value of actually going deeper in that pedagogy and understanding. It actually enhances the work that we do and the two disciplines. This is where we see disciplines almost merging because of the importance of that we don't live as in isolation and so on. And we'll definitely share the slides. Thank you for that, Ronald. They will be shared I think when the recording is shared by Liasa, that would be shared to all, I think, all that registered for the session, because I'll probably not go through everything, but I think, this has been quite a great engagement and so on. And I'm also just noting a comment by Remken in terms of, just in terms of how our students are using AI on the daily basis for everything and anything. And I know, as teachers, that's our biggest problem, is how do we do assessments when there's AI? What does that look like? And can we have assessments where they can't use AI? This is where I think exams are coming in. We wouldn't want to have exams, but I know a lot of institutions have brought back exams because then one is not able to police and one is wanting to create that critical thinking. Wants to, that's one of the graduates, some of the skills and attributes that they're supposed to have. It's part of its critical thinking is one being able to apply their mind to any situation rather than we every time are taking from somewhere and we don't even think around how we will do a certain essay. We already have an outline from somewhere. We already have what that is. And then our brains, what happens to our cognition in cases like that. And maybe I know my PhD student does work around this space. Probably if Martin, I'll allow you to share some of the work that you do in this space and practice, especially to special librarians, because then, it relates to specialized disciplines, which is very different from higher education, public libraries, and so on. And yeah, over to you, Martin, if you've got any comments or anything you'd like to share or add. Thank you. Are unmuted, Martin. We're not able to hear you, Martin. I'm not sure if you can hear us. I think you are unmuted, but I'm not sure. We're not able to hear. And maybe it's while Martin is sorting out maybe the technology, we might just, yeah, I guess something in terms of looking at closing off maybe the session to just allow any discussions and so on for the last few minutes. Thank you, Martin. And yeah, I mean, I think information literacy matters. There's no question around that. It is critical. It matters. And it's important then the aspects around critical thinking and critical thinking, critical information literacy that it's embedded in there. And I think our role as librarians, our role as individuals that know and have been exposed to this, our role is to empower communities. I mean, I attended this year the Library Information Services webinar, public library seminar in Cape Town, which Cape Town and Western Cape, which the theme was leading people and the importance of leading people. You can't leave the people behind, which you are leading. So it's important then that, yeah, that empowering role is important and very critical. And I think just for a few minutes, I'll share just with a librarian in practice, Martin Hipango, who is a librarian in Namibia, to probably just share some of the work that they've done or looked at around information literacy just before we close off. Please go ahead, Martin.
All right, thank you, Andiswa. Can you see my screen from that side?
Yes, we can.
All right, and sorry for that. When I joined as a panelist, my my mic wasn't working. So
I see.
Yes. So yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity and greetings to everyone here. Much has been said and much has been discussed. I'll just give a brief reflection on the work that I have done on the information literacy space as a practicing librarian in Namibia. So this is my journey in the LI space. When I first joined the government, and I was working as a special librarian in a special library at the National Earth Science and Energy Information Center, my manager actually told me the challenge that we have here is not that we cannot read. It's not that we cannot even find article. And it's not that we cannot write something or say something on the internet. So you must think deeper. So how you come up with how you have to come up with something that talk to our need. Talk to the people that are already people that have masters, people that have PhD, or people that are or to senior management. So that was the predicament that I was in, and I bumped into this quote that said the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn and learn and relearn. So this kind of guided me in coming up with a strategy of the information literacy in that space. So the challenge was that there was a considerable amount of time that they had without a qualified librarian. So much of the side of library and publication side was almost being forgotten. And the pressure of accounting as to why do we need to continue funding the library and publication despite the inactivity, and also the institution used to have like, it's a research institution, and it used to have like 2 journal or 3 journals both listed in indexes such as Scopus and Web of Science, but then those were delisted. And also the whole issue of fluidity and rapid change in the information sector. I just want to bring to your attention on how to view information literacy as well. And this was also mentioned before. Information literacy is a complex practice, and in a post-truth world, is becoming an increasingly important form of literacy. And when this executed, it enables a person to understand the sources and site of knowledge and ways of knowing that contribute to becoming emplaced. We talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about generative AI, we talk about hallucination, and we talk about where this information is coming from. So everyone can use ChatGPT, everyone can use a generative AI to get information here and there, or for students, for them to write their essay. Or in the workplace where I was, for someone to say, write me an article or write me a report. I attended this kind of conference, write me a report. So you want to teach people, where is this information coming from? Where is this information coming from? The one that they are getting from the artificial intelligence tools such as ChatGPT. And I think for me, that is critical information literacy. Literacy. We also talk about that this knowledge in turn provide a person with the capacity to think critically about the information, which is inherently in the context of their information literacy practice. We talk about different information literacy landscapes, be it workspace, be it in the general life, be it in the educational sector. And in workplace, we have different workplaces. It can be an academic environment, it can be a government institute, it can be a research institute, it can be intergovernmental organization. So this inform your information literacy practices. So what constitutes a practice? You realize that I've used practice instead of a skill. Lloyd actually redefined the information literacy as a practice that is enacted in a social setting, composed of a suite of activities and the skills and the way of knowing. So you have like a pyramid where you have like materials. What are some of the tools that we use? The tool that we use in the information literacy. And then you also have the competencies, what is required, what skills, what competencies are required. And you also have the meaning that we put to these tools, the meaning that we put to information literacy, literacy tools, the computers, the digital, many digital tools that we use. So that is that I just highlighted that in terms of the theoretical underpinning of this. Where does it come from, and how now people are moving from information literacy as a skill to information literacy as a practice within a specific context, within a workplace, within an academic environment, or within a public space, or in a general life. So what were the intervention that I did? So there are some of the intervention that I did when I first started working at a research library, consultation and research, which is also rooted in autoethnography. I think you can search this up. And most of this thing is SWOT analysis. What is the strength in that institution, and what are the weaknesses, and what are the opportunities that are available to you as a librarian, and also what are those threats. And then after that, now in the information literacy, we talk about the problematizing and engaging with the power structures underpinning the information production and dissemination. So these are some of the things one has to look at. Who owns the information? Where is it coming from? What are some of the voices that are underrepresented, and what are some of those voices that are represented in that information. And in my case at the Ministry of Mines and Energy, where I was working, most of the ministry had information. They had information. The researchers go out in the field and they collect information and they have this data. But then the challenge was they do not know how to repackage this information so that they can actually come up with brief reports, articles to continue to the work that has been already there. The journals are already there. We don't have to go publish somewhere else. We just have to continue with the work that that was already started. So, but the whole issue was that the information literacy was lacking. So I created an information literacy strategy, and then I presented this to management, and this strategy, the effectiveness of this strategy, it really depends on the environment and the willingness from the management to buy into the idea. And from the management to buy into the idea, they should first see the tangible results. So in that case, many of the workshop had happened, and not only workshop, but then it's like action research where we have workshops, and then we allow researchers to be grouped to write articles, and then through this we integrate the information literacy training, and then with that we were seeing results out of this information literacy. So the practice has already been said, from theory to reflection and action. I won't go into time. In terms of practice, how do we put what we are learning or what we learned from the classroom to action in our workplaces or in our daily lives? So these are some of the research output that culminated from this from the work that I've been doing throughout that space that I've been at the Ministry of Mines and Energy before I started my PhD here at UCT. So we see all these resources. They are a culmination of the work that we did in terms of the information literacy practices that we have done at the ministry. Yes, and just to conclude this reflection, you are the agency. Within your workplace, you are the agency, and use that agency as a librarian to influence critical information literacy in your workplace, and also identify different information literacies or different literacies that are available out there. People are now talking about indigenous literacy, media and information literacy, digital literacy. Know which one you are working with and know how you can concert that effort. Of course, we cannot do this in our own ivory towers. That's why we have these webinars, and we have collaborative effort to collaborate with each other and engage and make sure that we ensure critical information literacy has been enacted within the spaces that we are working at. So these are some of the references, and thank you very much for that. And those were just some of the reflection. I didn't go in deeper, but thank you for the engagement and for listening.
Thank you very much, Martin, for that. I think we really appreciate it. I know very much we're probably running out of time. So without wasting time, I think from my side, I think just also to say thank you for joining this session. I just appreciate just also us as not practicing in this space for being involved and come and invited to come and share what we know, and also just to learn from what is happening in practice. Thank you for attending and for just being here and engaging. We do appreciate that. I know there's been many people in the chat that have shared quite lovely comments and so on. We acknowledge that. Thank you for coming through and supporting this work. But I think from my side also, thank you to Liasa, to Special Libraries, especially Matisipi, for the invite and reaching out to UCT to come and do this work. We appreciate being called into these events and and just opportunities to be in this space with the librarians. And I thought I'd just share the work that we're doing at UCT. If anyone is available, you can join us online. We're doing a book launch. And thank you very much. And over to you, Matilda.
Andiswa, thank you so very much for this most interesting talk on information literacy. I'm sure all of us have learned from you. And then I also think not just learning from you, but from the inputs that we received from our colleagues, it is really, really very valuable to have these kind of discussions and to get our minds around this topic and to think about it. Because sometimes, yes, we do know it's out there, but we don't take the time to think and to talk about it. So we really appreciate your time and the effort for putting together this talk. And then I also would like to say thank you for Martin for sharing his information. Mosima Maninjwa, are you in the meeting? I haven't seen her as one of the participants.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Matilda, you didn't read your WhatsApp. Thank you so much. Musima is not here in the meeting, and I'm the one who's going to do the thank you. Colleagues, good day, good day, good day. What a knowledgeable, insightful presentation from Dr. Mfengu and Mr. Martin Hipangwa. Thank you so much. Profound content received. We really appreciate that. As Liasa Special Library Sector, I would like to thank Mr. Mfengu and Martin for sharing their busy time with us. It is much appreciated. Without you, this event wouldn't be happening today. We really appreciate that, Dr. Mfengu. Colleagues, on this note, I would like to take this opportunity to tell you that for Special Library Sector Interim Committee to arrange this webinar, we wanted to let our special librarians that UCT offers postgraduate degree where you can further your studies in order to specialize in this field. We have seen an example. Martin is a PhD student, and then he's working at the special libraries. So even as special librarians, we can share our knowledge one day. Let us not be these things to be done by the academic libraries and the public librarians only. To Ms. Matilda Smith, thank you very much for driving the program. We had some difficulties in the morning, but you managed to sort us out. To Ms. Maria Lesele, thanks very much for the welcoming thoughts and for sharing the purpose, for telling us the purpose of today's webinar. To Liasa office, I know that you had power problems, but you managed to make sure that we commence with our event. We really appreciate your help, Mr. Nzimande. Thank you, thank you. Continue with your good work. To our most important colleagues, thanks very much, our participants, for the wonderful mix of ideas and the insight shared today. We indeed learn every day from each other. The presentation was flowing into the stimulating conversation. Without you, my colleagues, this webinar wouldn't be successful as it was. We started with 116 delegates, and then it went down to 97. Thank you, thank you. You are the best. Dr. Mfengu, I really appreciate your help. Thank you, colleagues. And I wish you all a successful working Friday ahead and the coming weekend. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much. Stay well.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.